Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Ahmed. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed in New York City, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island. And once again, we start this thinking about the hostage, day 411. We're recording this on the eve of 411 of the days of captivity. It almost seems that this is endless, and unfortunately, it seems that the world is forgetting about them and the excruciating agony of these hostages and their families. So we have not forgotten. We continue to pray for their recovery and pray that God and the entire Jewish people help unleash the will to get these hostages home finally. I don't know any other way to say this. We are studying to figure out questions and figure out the questions of the Parsha, try to apply them to our lives, try to figure out what's going on in the Torah. What's so beautiful about this is that, we've been at the Parsha Talk for, I don't know, 4 years now, uh, and longer than that, and we still find plenty of things to talk about, including in this week's Parsha, which we have to say is amazing. Parsha Hayyei Sarah. Hayyei Sarah, starts out with the death of Sarah, Abraham's procurement of a suitable grave spot for her, Marat Machpelah, in Hebron or Kiryat Arba, the negotiation that he does with Ephron the Hittite, um, and then we feel this great pivot in the parsha, which starts at chapter 24, where the opening is Abraham Zaken Baba Yamim. Abraham is elderly, advanced in years, and God has blessed him with everything. And we've talked about that in the past. But what perplexes me on this go around, and that deserves a close reading, is the scene that happens right after that. So we can take it, really closely. He calls his servant, Vayomer Avraham Elavdo. He calls up his servant, and the sermon is Zikan Beito, the elder of his household. Interesting term. Hamoshel B'chol Asher Lo, the guy who governs everything. So it's his like executive director, right? Abraham it's the CEO of the Abraham household. Okay. And he says, put your hand under my thigh. We're not going to get into that. That's the way that they make oaths in antiquity. Okay. As they say, geves. Okay. Va'ashbiacha, I want to swear by God, God of the heavens, God of the earth. Asher lo tikach isha livni mibnot haknaani. Do not take a woman from the daughters of the Canaanites. Asher anochi yoshe b'kerbo, that I dwell among them. Ki el artzi ve'el moladati telech. You go back to my birthplace, back to my land, my homeland, my birthplace. Velakachta isha livni liyitzchak. You take a woman from there. And so the servant replies in a kind of stunning reply, which is, what if she doesn't want to go back? You're telling me to go find a woman? Fine. I think of Don Rickles used to go on the Johnny Carson show and it says, I need a girl, I need a girl, right? This was his thing, right? And basically they're saying, get a girl, get a girl from my son, okay? And he says, okay. And if she doesn't want to go back, what happens? He says, "Ulai lo toveh haisha lalechet acharai el haaretz hazot." Maybe she won't want to go back, which is stunning in its own way. Sheva bincha, should I bring your son el haaretz asher atzaltem misham to this land, to the land I'm going to? You want me to get a wife for your son, and if I go and find a woman and she doesn't want to go out, what am I supposed to do? And Abraham says, under no terms will you take my son back there. God will, God, Adonai Elohei Hashemayim, God of heaven, Asher lekachani mibeit avi, who took me out of my father's home, in my homeland, Vasher diber li, and spoke to me and swore to me, Lazarachashet atenet haaretz, I will give the land to you. Hu yishlach malacho lefanecha. He's going to send his angel for you. V'lakachta isha livni misham, and you'll take a woman from there for him. V'im lo tovei isha, and if she doesn't agree, then you're clean. Nikita mi shvati, right? Nikita mi shvati zot. You're free to do whatever you want. Rak et bini lo tashev shama. Don't bring my son. Now this is such a it's an interesting scene. We haven't looked at it in depth. I think it reveals a lot, and I'd like you to read it with me. With these questions. Which is first question is why is he doing this? What is Abraham's purpose here? And why the uncertainty? Why the oath taking? Is there a story underneath the story, basically? And basically, how are you reading this, reacting to the story? I'll start. Well, eeny, meeny, Jeremy, go ahead. Give me your answers. Give me
Okay, I got a couple of answers that may coalesce with each other or may be a little off angle with each other. Isaac is the one patriarch who was told to remain Gur Ba'aretz Azot, stay here in the promised land. You can't go to Egypt. You can't go to Mesopotamia. Isaac is the character of the patriarchs who is most passive. He redigs Abraham's wells. He negotiates with the Philistines, but he's not the kind of guy who, if his nephew was kidnapped, would take 318 henchmen and chase somebody north of Damascus. He's not the kind of person who would wrestle with an angel. He's not his father. He's not his son. I think Isaac's a somewhat weak character. And if he's to go back to Mesopotamia, there's all too high a likelihood that everything that Abraham has started to build on his hero's journey, his lech lecha me'artzecha mimoladecha mibeit avicha, all the things that he's left behind will become undone with the not so dominant character of Yitzchak. To go with that, and this is my main answer, I think that the story that is told in this week's Parasha is about the really important ancestral figure of this generation, who's Rebecca. Rebecca is the character who, like Abraham and like Jacob, has to make a journey from Mesopotamia to Canaan. And so I think that the story is told, even though presumably there is more than one woman in Padan Aram or Aram Naharaim, and if the servant went and bachelorette number one didn't want to go, bachelorette number two might have been the right one. But the story's not told that at all. It's told that there kind of is a woman. We were told her name at the end of last week's Parsha as a foreshadowing. And if that one doesn't want to go, which is a perfect one, and she is the destined one, she is the child of destiny, she's Destiny's child, she's Beyonce. If Beyonce doesn't want to come, then he's free of the oath, and Abraham doesn't say, well, get second best. There's no second best in this story.
Well, you suggested Isaac is second best.
Isaac is kind of second best, but Beyonce is in a class by herself.
Okay, so it's hard to follow that. I'm not good at pop references, but I think one of the things that we sometimes overlook is what is actually going on here. And one of the features of the story that we don't really talk about is why does Abraham send his servant, who the rabbis identify as Eliezer, which is, we'll use that as a reference because it's easier to think of Eliezer than the nameless servant. And that's because Abraham's journeys have come to an end. He started off in Ur Kasdim. He went to Haran with his father. He came into Eretz Yisrael. He went to Egypt, and then he comes back to Eretz Yisrael. So he's done what he has to do, but he labors under a peculiar circumstance, and that is that the God that he elected to follow is good at making promises, perhaps not so good at fulfilling them. And one of the difficulties, I think, when we read the Torah is that the Torah collapses many, many years in a few sentences. So you're going to have a son, Abraham. He has a son. But, it's a 25-year difference between the promise and the son. So Abraham has to secure his family in the land of Israel. He's done everything he can do, but his life is coming to an end. and now he must secure it for the next generation. He doesn't send Isaac in part because Isaac has to remain immune from the desires of the East and the desires of the West, of Babylonia and Egypt. And I just wanted to add to what you said in terms of Isaac doing things that Abraham did. He did the same thing with Avimelech that his father did as well. So he also repeats some of the, say, negative features of his father as well. But I think that the other piece that we have to consider is Ma'arat Machpelah. The significance of Ma'arat Machpelah is twofold. First of all, it's a possession in the land. It's the first part of Eretz Israel that Abraham owns. But also, I guess if we could use what we call Ma'arat Machpelah today, it's an underground cave. So this is Abraham, in a sense, sinking roots in the land, which is half of the national project. Part of it is to create roots, and the other part of it is to build a family. So the rest of the Parsha, what we're talking about, chapter 24, is about building a life above ground, which is the future, to complement the life below ground, which is the past, where the dead will be buried.
Look, that's very nice. That's elegant. That's lovely. And here, how do we deal with the following, which is that after this story, Abraham goes and marries another woman and has six children with them, with that other woman, and really, sets in motion a whole set of other nations. Um, so what you're saying is that Abraham, was not his journeys from the land were done, and yet he's perfectly well enough to have another family. Um,
He
when
got a
the
second wind.
he's got a second, yeah, when the text says Zakain Baba Yamim, he's advanced in age, so there's an assumption there that he's not going to go on trips anymore, right? He's too old for trips. So okay, we'll understand that. And you're saying also, and I'm only gonna respond to Jeremy that Isaac is a minor character, or because my name is Yitzchak. Okay, so
Not you,
of
not
course,
Yitzhak
no,
Luria,
but we
not
should not
Yitzhak Rabin.
we should not underestimate the role of the connector, the holder together, the person who links the generations, right? That's what Yitzchak's role is. Yitzchak, I wrote this in a sketch on the Akedah, trying to interview Isaac, the podcast of Isaac, and the question was, "What's so important about you?" And he says, I'm the first follower. I'm the first of the next generation. There's no one like Abraham, but there's also there's no one else who could be the first, the founder. But I'm the first successor. That's what he says.
I got something great. I got something great for you about Yitzhak the first. Two things. He's the first. He's the character who is described with love twice.
Yes.
Kachna et bincha et yichidcha et asher ahavta et Yitzchak. He's described as
The child was loved.
take your one son, your only son, your favorite son, whom you love, Isaac, who is described as the recipient of parental love. And at the end of our parsha, it's he loved his wife and was comforted her after the death of Sarah. He is the first person described in the Torah as having the husband and wife love, the romantic love, the erotic love, and those things are great. But I'm just pointing out that if the great biblical heroes, like in all the other world's literatures, have to make a journey from here to there, have to struggle, have to overcome, who have to say, I'm choosing to leave to forge something new. That part is not Yitzhak.
Well, I think, many years ago, the journalist Amos Elon wrote an important book, Fathers and Sons, about the founding generation of Israel and the conflicts that they had with their children who were born in the land, but did not have necessarily the philosophic drive or the pioneering drive to come to a new land and create a new nation, because that was their given, having been born in the land. And I think that there's something of that in Isaac. You cannot be a pioneer forever. And the pioneer must become a settler of sorts, or a settler down, I guess would be a more politic way to say it. And that's part of Isaac's function, is that he is the first one to grow up in the promised land. And I think that's incredibly important.
I
He
just
doesn't have to do anything, he just has to live his life there.
so the the sternness with which Abraham directs the servant to prohibit his son from journeying back there. Shamar lecha pen tashivet b'ni shama. That's very, very strong language. In a sense, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about, the three of us. We have a good number of children between the three of us. 12, right? There are 12 children.
Good,
One for
good.
each tribe.
Okay. So, and we as parents have all encouraged our children to travel, especially to Israel, but to travel wherever they could. I mean, and because we understand that part of a person's education, that travel is a great form of education, both in terms of the world and in terms of yourself. Now, admittedly, that's a very modern, idea, because in antiquity, people obviously didn't travel very much. But Abraham did travel, as you mentioned. He traveled to all these different places, and within the land itself, he travels. And he's saying that experience of encountering an ancestral culture or another culture, that is not the experience. So in some way, he is conveying a sense of lack of confidence in his son, right? And if I were Isaac, which I am, I would say, but dad, I want to go on a trip. I need to go. Everybody else is going. I want to go.
I want to just throw in another small piece of evidence for, not to be stubborn about this. I don't see any evidence that Isaac has the agency to even have that feeling. And I'll just give you a piece of evidence.
Sure.
Okay, aside from the midrashic uh, approach that Isaac is 37 at the age of the Akedah, but he is 40 when he takes Rivka to be married. That date is given specifically.
Yes.
40. And so let's just say if you factor in enough time to get back and forth between Canaan and Aram Naharayim and some time to hang out, he's 38, 39, and Abraham continues to say to the Eved, to the servant, Hishamer lecha pen tashiv et b'ni shama.
Ah,
You take care that you not send him back, you not bring him back to Mesopotamia. And then when the Eved says, well, maybe she won't come back, then
keep it.
v'nakita meshavua zot, shwati zot, rak et b'ni lo tashev shama. Don't you bring him back. We are talking about a 38-year-old, 39-year-old guy,
That's
and
something.
and the servant is told, don't bring him back, not don't let him go, prevent him if he tries to go, stop him, tackle him, leave him, lock the door behind him. He's actually portrayed as an a character without a lot of drive and agency in the hands of even the CEO of Abraham Inc.
I think that we perhaps are missing something here. And I think a decent reading of the story will suggest to us that Abraham is not entirely sure how this mission is going to work itself out. And his concern is that he will not live to see its fruits. And therefore, he cautions the servant not to let Isaac go back. Um, because if Abraham was still alive and the servant comes back, then he would talk to Isaac himself, I think. But he has to make provision for the fact that his voice may no longer be among the living,
Yeah.
and he still has to be concerned with how the promise is going to unfold.
Do you think that he is really talking about his own mortality here?
I think there's a suggestion of it because otherwise, why is it an issue for the servant? It's an issue for the servant because the servant might have to be the one to make the decision because Abraham cannot.
So I want to propose this reading, which is, it's an issue because, as we said at the beginning, God, as you said, Barry, God makes a lot of promises and hasn't delivered, and it's been one ordeal after another for Abraham, and he's basically saying, "I'm cashing in here. God better God owes me this. God has to deliver for me this." I'm reading it in a kind of forceful way here. I find Abraham's tone here, to be not gentle and generous and kind, but very stern and saying, this is owed to me. I've paid my due. This is a guy who has really paid his dues over the last, it's from 75 to he's about 140 now. So for 65 years, he's paid his dues, and God has promised and promised it 7 or 8 times now. And he said, if God is good on his word, then he's going to deliver this for me.
Right. But I think what you said is very important. But even so, even with all the sternness or the touch of bravado, shall we say, there's no certainty. He still does
Sure.
not know.
Sure. And you would think that he would know, and that there would be a little Rahmanis, that God would have a little bit of compassion for him, to say, don't worry, you're gonna have grandchildren, you're gonna be fine, okay? And God doesn't intervene here for that. And maybe we'll have to leave that off the table right now. Okay, but
Well, I just
Why,
want
why,
to have
why
one
doesn't
thing
God
that
intervene?
the God, go ahead.
In what sense does God not intervene? Because here's what I want to say about, even though I just myself made a tight, little diuk, a little deduction based on the ages in the Bible story, we do know that Abraham, even at this stage, has another 35 years to live, and a new concubine and a bunch more children. Um, if you work out the dates, he gets to meet Esav and Yaakov pretty
yeah,
well, and then the story of, by the dates and the midrashic tradition, the story of Jacob with the lentil soup tricking Esav is at Abraham's shiva, so to speak. Um, but I think that the reading of the story, again, with maybe a little less precise attention to the dates, is that Abraham is now an old man, that the whole drive of Genesis has been progeny is coming. And even though there was a bunch of hiccups in the early days, um, that God is, the providential quality of the story is that God is going to make it happen. And the miraculous designation of exactly the right, if the following thing happens when I get to the well, and sure enough, it happens, the reader, maybe an ancient reader and a modern reader both say, okay, God's making this work out. And one of the pieces of evidence that I like this is a little bit later here in chapter 24, when the servant gets to the well, and he says, "Vayomer Adonai Elohe Adoni Avraham
yeah.
Hakrena Lefanai Hayom." Lord, God of my master Abraham, make it happen. Hakrena, make this thing happen. Lefanai Hayom, make it happen today. Bang, and it happens today.
So
And that's the God. That's the God of Abraham, Elohe Abraham. And so I
Right,
think
but it's
the
the
servant
God
feels
of
like,
Abraham who's not speaking to Abraham.
that's the point. This is the
yeah,
point. The point is Avram has to force the hand. It's like, I always want an alternate version of the story, which is God appears to Abraham, says, Abraham, you did such an amazing thing. You're such a wonderful guy. Here's what's going to happen. Look, we want your son to get married. We're going to make it happen. Go send Eliezer, get Rebecca, go to this and this address, call him up, bring her back, and that's it. That's what's going to happen. Okay. And God is not in the beginning of the story, which is, I have to say, from this vantage point, it feels aggravating. It's like, God,
Well,
you promised me everything, but I got to move things along just the way my late wife did. Sarah needed to move things along because she got me to cohabit with Hagar, and we got another child there. But you know, it's not happening according to our schedule. And I need to move it along because he's not doing it, is what he's saying.
and
And
it's
I,
striking at the end of the story, Abraham's not there.
yeah,
Right,
which is
when Rivka shows up with the servant, where's Abraham?
right. So let's talk
well,
about Rivka for a
we
second.
don't. The story doesn't answer that, even though we do know that he's still alive. But let me ask you another question, and then you can continue on here. Abraham says, "Don't don't do not take a wife for my son Yitzchak from these Canaanim." Do you suppose, and we know that in another generation, Esav will marry the Canaanites, and Yitzchak and Rivka won't like that. Do you think that at this stage of the story, it's not in the Torah at all, I'm just asking you to speculate. Do you think at this stage of the story, Abraham, who came to Canaan, who has had apparently decent relationships with people, the people that he knows in Hebron, Aner ve'Eshkol, are Baalei Brit Abraham. They are his, what would you say, colleagues, Baalei Brit.
They're his allies, but they're not
they're
his
his
family.
allies. Do you suppose that he said, all right, I think we're going to marry one of these? And he looked and he tried and he hoped and he thought, and he just really didn't find one, and then hatches the plan to go back to Mesopotamia. Or from the outset, he said, whatever happens, he cannot marry a Canaanite. This has to go back to that ancestral home, which I had to leave, but it is our clan, it is our mishpacha, and we have to continue
So
on in that fashion.
I agree with you. I think the answer is, but I think it's also something that I
You think
think
it's
you
the
said
second or the
last week.
first?
I think it's both.
Everything.
Here's what I think. I think you said last week, and I kept thinking about this, which is the obvious truth that the child for the covenant has to be the natural born child of Abraham and Sarah. That was predetermined. So that was the child. I mean, if we read Lech Lecha carefully, I will make you a great nation. But at the end of their lives, he's got nothing. He's only got one child. He doesn't have a great nation. And so what Abraham is doing basically is saying, we have to go back because we have to start over with our family again. It's got to be 2.0, generation 2 here. He cannot marry a Canaanite. He's got to go back to the ancestral stock to because that's the covenantal stock, basically. That's that at least they have an echo of that covenantal, and at least because they're related to it, there's kinship there, and they will be connected to us. Okay, and that
Right.
brings. Go ahead.
Go on, go on.
I want to just get to Rebecca because and Jeremy, of course, this whole story is the inverse of Abraham's migration, but the whole story does hinge on Rebecca. Look, the story, the oath is if she won't agree to go back, then you are clean from this oath. Vinikita minashuaze. And the whole beautiful story, which we love to go through, it's such the richest little narrative in the whole Torah with the well and the camels and everything. And finally, they bring the girl before her family and they say to her, so you want to go with this guy? And she says only one word, Elech. And the whole of Jewish history hinges on one word recited by one woman at this one moment. That's her agency. So we could say Isaac has no agency in the story, and Rebecca has all the agency in her story. That's your nodding. Go ahead, amplify that.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think that when she says Elech, she is repeating a Lech Lecha moment. She is a powerful figure. Isaac is the guy who is going to be blind because he doesn't know who to succeed him because he likes venison, and that's how he's going to pick who should succeed him. No, Rebecca is the one who gets this thing in motion, like Sarah is the character who gets this thing in motion. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Right, but Isaac has to be the one to give the blessing, and we sometimes forget that.
But this is a
That's a matter of agency, though. I mean, he's a necessary part of the transmission of the covenant.
this reminds me of a wonderful line in that great movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, in which I forget if it's the mom or the aunt, whether it's Lainey Kazan or Andrea Martin, both terrific actors. One of them says, "The man is the head of the family, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants." So Rebecca is the neck, even though Isaac is the nominal head of the family. And so I do feel like there is some kind of sexism about he's just the boss because he's the boss, but she is the one with all of the real power.
Okay, so very nicely put. I just like to add the following observation that the arc of Breshit, of the book of Genesis, is a kind of winnowing. We start with Adam, and then we start again with Noah. And then when the generations decline again, God chooses Abraham, but there has to be a further winnowing. So we have the model of two sons from two women, and we opt for the one from Sarah, as Elliot so nicely put, and then even a further winnowing. When you have two sons from the same mother, only one is going to be the recipient of the covenant. And to your point earlier about not marrying Canaanite women, in the generation of Jacob's sons, they do marry Canaanite women. But
Right.
that's because there are enough of them that their place in the land is already secure.
Sure.
And one of them is a superstar hero. He marries Tamar, who is like Mamish a hero.
Really.
Yeah.
So just let's look at the last scene of this story. Vatakam Rivka v'narotet. It's quite a procession. She has a whole entourage. Vatirkavna al gmalim. She rides on these camels. Vatelachna acharei ish. She goes after the man, the servant. Vayikach ha'eved et Rivka vayilach. And he takes her and they go, okay? And we get the scene that Isaac is somehow wandering. He's davening mincha, of course, in the afternoon, and they see
At
him
Hagar's house.
at a guard. They see him from a distance, but the sarif she sees him, and she falls from the camel, and she asks the servant, "Mi ha'ish halazeh holech basadeh?" Who's that man? Vayomer Eved, Hu Adoni, he's my master. But and she covers herself.
So doesn't that suggest to you that Abraham is no longer on the scene?
It does actually suggest that, and I mean it is a moment. Look, it's also a moment where he's got to kind of give him a little bit of grandeur, okay? Because you know he, who knows what he's wearing? He could be schlumpily dressed. He's wandering. He's like, what is he doing in the field? We have a very romantic picture of him that he's kind of meditating and he's thinking to himself and all sorts of things. And he could be just smoking or something. I don't know.
Well, how about this one? This is Vatisar Rivka et einea, vateret Yitzchak, and she lifts up her eyes and she sees him vatipol me'al agamal, and she falls off. Not she climbs gracefully down the camel.
Right.
Well,
She
because the first words out of her
falls.
mouth are, God, what have I gotten myself into?
Oh, and then
Oh,
what's so
wait,
amazing.
who's that man? You telling me that that's the guy? Oh my goodness! And she falls right off the camel, right on her kepi.
So let's take the last two verses. Vayisapera Eved Yitzhak. It's such a great story. He tells him everything that happened. Et kol advarim asher asa. It's the telling of the story that entices him. The servant understands that he's got to make this work between the two of them. He's got to set it up. I think that's so crucial. The fact that the servant functions as the narrator of everything that goes, because the servant is so excited about what happened. And so then the last verse, Vayevi'eha Yitzchak Ha'ela Sarah Imo, Isaac brings her into his mother's tent. Vayikach et Sarah, Vayikach et Rivka, he takes Rivka, Vaytehila Lisha, she becomes his wife, Vayeh Ehaveha, as you recalled, and he loved her, Vayinachem Yitzchak Acharei Imo, and he's comforted from his mother. So yes, Isaac is the one who is beloved by his father, Asher Ahavta, and who is able to love another person. In this case, his wife, which is he is the first of the patriarch of about whom it is said that he loves his wife. It doesn't say that Abraham loves Sarah, right? And we could argue that
Well,
love was
they
lost.
come from a different world, though, right? They're Mesopotamian.
But what's the love here? The love is that everything worked out. Look, I think it's a great romantic story where everything works out and they live happily ever after, sort of. Right now they're living happily ever after. They are the marriage that works in the in the patriarchal
Well,
narrative.
I think you have to read between the lines, right? Because the 20 years of barrenness takes its toll.
Absolutely.
but
Yeah,
I guess that's next week.
but he's devoted to her,
He
and
is devoted to her because
that
I think there's more substance to him. I think maybe the problem is that we judge him by the standards of Abraham when we have to judge him by his own standards.
all right. Well, we've come to the conclusion of that story. The story of Abraham also ends. He passes away. We miss him. We miss
Never.
Nebuch. And lots to learn, lots to think about, lots to discuss. We want to thank everyone for watching, for listening, and for bringing us into your Torah lives and sharing our joy and our humor and our anguish at
And
the
our love of Torah.
and our love of Torah too.
which
And
we love a
you
lot.
have a good Shabbat with this, and we'll see you next week on the next edition. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.